You need to read Matthew 20:1-6, the parable of the generous landowner. I've become hooked on a program which most of you will have watched before. After seeing a couple of episodes of the last series, I went out and bought all 6 episodes of Downton Abbey, complete with the Christmas specials, and Roberta and I have been watching it over the past few weeks. We're up to series 3, episode 4, so we've got a long way to go. Another series we're watching and enjoying is the new All Creatures Great and Small, and I'm looking forward to a new series of Call the Midwife, which I've watched from when it was first transmitted. These programs are very popular, some of the most watched on television. So what is their appeal? What has made them so popular? They are not much like other modern dramas filled with violence and swearing, sex. So what makes them so popular? As they're quite hard-hitting and they don't shy away from depicting war, deprivation and hardship, prostitution and corruption, hypocrisy and brutality. The widespread poverty and pollution of the day, the use of the hangman's noose, the school cane, the backstreet abortionist and the gangs and brutal crime, which all played a part of the times these stories are set in, which range from just before the First World War, when Downton begins, right up into the mid-60s of Call the Midwife. Would I want to go back and live in these times? No. Just think of all the improvements that have been made in medicine and science and technology and travel, to name but a few things which have made life so much easier. I think that these programs are so popular because they show, amongst the tribulations of daily life, a sort of gentleness and innocence, a simplicity and honour that seem to have been lost or watered down over the years. The story of the generous landowner would, I think, seem strange to most people today. This parable is about the landowner rather than the workers and what they believe their rights to be. The Jews of Jesus' day would have understood its meaning because the Book of Law says, "You shall not keep for yourself the wages of the labourer until the morning," or in other words, look after the poor because they need the wages due to them in order to survive. This is a story about God's grace and how it is there to benefit all who ask or seek it out. This story may be difficult for people to understand today because I believe that today we're more concerned about the individual, the I, rather than the we. So to today's readers, this story seems unfair because everyone receives the same pay, even though they have not worked for the same amount of time. Jesus is saying that to receive God's grace, we first have to recognize that the difference between people is inconsequential to God, because everybody is welcome to his grace. Does it matter if you miss a train by an hour or by a second? You've still missed it. Do you love a 9-year-old child 3 times more than a 3-year-old child just because it's 3 times older? In other words, what does it matter what someone else receives, as long as both receive what were expected? In this parable, the wages are given by the employer, not by the workers. It is his gift to give and for the workers to receive. I think that the attitude of the day, as it was quite clearly in Jesus' day, is for the worker to complain even though his or her needs have been met. The workers clearly had not thought about the landowner's generosity, care and concern for his workers. Jesus is saying that the people have lost sight of the grace and the love of God. This week on television I watched a documentary called Spitfire, which was of course about the iconic World War II plane. In the film, one pilot spoke about the morning of the 15th of October 1940. I think it was the day that Hitler launched his Luftwaffe bombing attacks against Britain. The pilot said, "I remember looking up into the sky. It was bright and sunny, and I offered up a little prayer. It's going to be a busy day, O Lord, and if I forget you, don't you forget me. Give me this day, please. Please, give me this day." He then spoke of something spiritual. He said that as he flew into combat, I could see a vast panorama of blue skies above me and in front of me, with the green of England below me, and it helped. The second man spoke of flying his Spitfire off an aircraft carrier near Gibraltar to lead a dozen fellow Spitfire pilots to Malta. They had another plane, not a Spitfire, leading them, which got lost in the clouds. The pilot said, "There I was with no maps. I didn't know where I was. I was surrounded by sea and sky, and I had just turned 20 years of age, with planes following me. I didn't know what to do. I'll tell you what I did. I prayed. I prayed to God. I prayed, and God answered. He doesn't answer you with a flash of lightning. Something in your head just comes. I flew back to Gibraltar, 850 miles away, and out of the blue I found the fleet. He then flew back to Malta, and out of fuel had to land in a bombing raid between the craters. Two men, nearing 100 when the film was made in 2018, speaking about a time of war when they were barely out of their teenage years. Two men speaking openly about God and faith and what it meant to them when their backs were up against a wall. Two men who represent the times they lived through. Times when the word "we" was, I think, more important than the word "I." Now, to go back to those television series, I think that they're so popular because they show us a time when "we" was more important than "I." People had come through difficult times together and were hungry for change and worked together to achieve it. A time when we were perhaps more generous and kind to one another and were more restrained in our needs and wants. Not better times, but rather different times. Times when people were not afraid to talk about God, belief and faith, or for that matter, the lack of it. A time when God was built into the fabric of our homes, our schools, and our workplaces. A time when we cared more for one another and communities were stronger. I believe that we can learn from remembering the struggles and the achievements of the past, to learn to work harder in being more generous to one another, and to be kinder and more restrained in our own needs and wants. In short, to be more like a landowner than his workers. I think that that is what Jesus meant, and I think that that is what he will be saying now, today, to us, in our modern and at times quite selfish world. Don't let's forget God in the busyness of our lives. And let's remember always about the power of prayer. Let's never lose that.